This episode of Chainsaw Man was lovely. It was fantastic. And if for whatever reason you weren't convinced by the first two episodes, this one will set it in stone for you. You'll have fun with it and you'll wholeheartedly enjoy it. There is a ton of great moments within here, a ton that I'm impressed with, but overall just seeing the direction of these three episodes so far has been so comforting. I was convinced of the first and second episode, but this one really just nails it home that they are doing the best for this show in a lot of new ways. The vibe, atmosphere, and tone may be a little bit different to what you're expecting, but a one-to-one translation from manga to anime isn't always necessary, and sometimes it could be even worse. Fujimoto has a very distinct style when it comes to manga, and the type of tone that he genuinely likes to build, it's very chaotic, and something that allows that to be very flexible is how it's digested, the transition between all of these tones, and within manga, it's entirely up to the reader. When it comes to anime, however, this is paced out very differently. It's not up to you how much you indulge within it. Now that tonal shift has to be managed. It has to be controlled and appropriately put into position for you to enjoy. If it's too quick, it's going to be too jarring, and if it's too slow, it's going to be boring and drawn out. Finding that perfect transition is what I talked about in my previous video for episode 2 is nailed within episode 3. They continuously do it time and time again, kind of blending these neutral moments with severity, with comedy, and really being able to jump back and forth comfortably. For me, it never felt overwhelming. It never felt unwelcomed. If anything, it just felt natural. It felt nice. And when you balance it out with scenes that extend or are drawn out for a long period of time to really set you into this atmosphere and put you into the moment, it's gorgeous. It's really addicting to indulge within and something that you can continue to fall in love with. Noticeably for a lot of you, the character designs within this episode, they stand out a lot. Definitely not in a bad way, but a creative way. So you might notice that there is different emphasis or detail towards characters that may not have previously been there. It's not over exaggerated, but more so with how characters are approached with framing and putting them within the scene. There seems to be a lot more stylistic choice for the person directing this episode. This is going to be a pretty normal thing. Every episode is, I believe, directed by a different group of individuals that are obviously all working together in conjunction to keep consistency, but that doesn't mean their own personality, style, and creativity and flair can't come out on top. I've seen a couple of tweets and mentions by people because of how beautiful these character designs were. Apologies, I don't remember the name, but they've done a phenomenal job, and you see it littered throughout the entirety of the episode. Super crisp, super gorgeous, and a great way to bring more focus into these characters for their more personal or intimate moments. There's a lot of things that I appreciate from the anime. One thing I find myself going back to is usually specific scenes that feel very monumental, almost like they're framed within the section of the episode to be that way. What I mean by this is something as simple as a conversation between Power and Denji when it comes to Meowie, the cat that Power wants to get back and trying to persuade Denji to do it for her. It feels very identifiable. Like it's a scene that should normally just meld together within the episode, but because they take their time with it, because they do these very simple but usually intuitive camera techniques and how they frame both of them and either pulling in super close, zooming out really far, and genuinely just being crafty with the approach, makes the scene a lot more memorable and really just boxes itself as an identifiable moment within the episode. It's definitely not the only one, but it's a lot more noticeable for moments that aren't necessarily that big. I really appreciate these moments, and they usually differ quite heavily depending on the creative talent behind it and the approach that they want to take with the scene. I think what helps put these scenes in frames really well is the little flashback montage that they do within this episode. They do it twice, one with Denji and Pochita and the other with Power and Meowie. With how seamless it's integrated within mid-conversation, I couldn't help but just be really happy that they were able to put it within there. Again, it's not the most outlandish, world-breaking, unique type of animation or technique used to tell a story, but it's definitely things that could be either easily glossed over or just abruptly thrown in there that really takes you out of the moment. Instead, they kind of just effortlessly lead you down this path naturally with the conversation, even with the music in the background kind of tailoring itself towards this transition, and then you get that flashback. And you won't even really notice the actual transition because it's usually overlaid by narration, either Denji or Power talking about this situation. And overall, it feels very nice to not only learn this information firsthand without it taking away from anything else, but two, you can appreciate how seamless it really was. Towards the later half of the episode, you see a combination of everything that I've just talked about relocate itself towards the emotion within the scene. It creates a very intense atmosphere, obviously extremely purposeful purposeful, but with animation, with music, it's obviously a lot more amplified, and it really elevates the scene in a different way in comparison to its source material. There's no right or wrong, good or bad answer here, but just a different experience. And specifically the one I'm talking about is the Power, Bat Devil, and Denji scene, where Power finally understands what Denji meant about Pochita living within his heart. For me, what I love about this scene is that there's no massive indicators on how emotional it is. It's not someone obviously crying or screaming out or having these massive bodily movements to emphasize how distraught or upset they may feel. Instead, it's a combination of vocal work, very slight, sincere movements within the face, the eyes, and the lighting and music. Everything combines itself really beautifully to build this sense of emotion that you 100% connect with. Even if you don't like Power, even if you didn't understand the scene, or you force someone to start watching from this moment, you could tell that this was such an upsetting, emotional moment for Power. And again, elevates, just lifts up the whole scene very beautifully, and I absolutely adore it. I feel like I shouldn't have to kind of bullet point everything like, oh, this isn't revolutionary things, this is stuff that every other anime can and will do, of course, no doubt in my mind. Just seeing it unfold in a story that I love to gush over and talk about and have put already a lot of time into talking about for a couple of years now, it just feels really nice to get a great, talented, and inspired anime adaptation. One that's filled with so much respect for its source material and its author. Because I know all of us have at least sat through 2, 3, maybe even 4 anime adaptations for your favorite manga, and it has not been anywhere close to the source material. And yes, I am looking at you directly, Tokyo Ghoul, one of the biggest upsets for the community. That's beside the point. To really capitalize on this episode, to really send you off feeling high and mighty with a response filled with dopamine, you get a massive fight. The battle between the Bat Devil and Denji. What's great about this is not only the distance that the fight actually covers, from sky to land to buildings to a long range of different environments and backgrounds that you're playing around with, the sheer size of the Bat Devil and Denji makes for an interesting situation. You have to be very playful with how you frame both of these characters within shot, and that's probably the biggest thing that you'll notice. There is a lot of creativity going into how this camera is moving and what it wants to show and not show. I would highly recommend going back and just watching that fight. The camera work on its own is very intuitive in how they want to model these scenes specifically to make them very directional in approach. So much so that when both of these characters clash, you yourself kind of clash with the scene, because at one point you're filled with so much momentum following Denji and he hits the Bat Devil and the camera kind of pulls itself back in response. Simple things like that, but taking the extra steps to add that immersion, obviously I'm going to wholeheartedly love. And there's definitely going to be a lot that I miss, but the ones that I do notice, I'm going to obviously praise. That fight was absolutely gorgeous. The scale, the complexity of things, the framing of movement and action, the weight of everything feels hefty as well, and the animation is top-notch fluidity. I assume the approach towards using different animation techniques is dependent on the person that's in charge of the episode. It's not to say that it's difficult to point out CGI, but more so it's difficult to point out the proper usage of CGI. See, it's never really that simple. I'm not someone that's well versed into the technical side of this process and how they build around it, but there's a lot of kind of implementations of things that turn out to be 2D or turn out to be partially 3D or rotoscoped or any sort of other techniques that can be utilized that a lot of people will completely wash out to only being CGI. The reason I mention this is I think understanding the scale of the approach, the full picture, if possible, is really important. Obviously, the umbrella situation is that the animation industry is very grueling and stressful, and sometimes CGI is used to save resources and time, but other times it's purposefully used to be creative and flexible in a way that maybe couldn't be possible with 2D animation given the amount of time. At the end of the day, there's a lot of creative decisions going into this animation production, and you can see the utmost respect. This is not a show that they want to drop the ball on. This is not a show that they want to waddle around the edges. They want to do this right, and they have been doing this right. With CG, with 2D, with whatever techniques they are using. This final scene is kind of the perfect collaboration and pinnacle of it, with a stylistic direction from the people working on it. I am more than happy and impressed with this climatic ending. I think it was wonderful, it was a great send-off, and should hopefully fill people with confidence when it comes to the animation techniques being used, because I guarantee guarantee you there are some scenes within there that you may think is 2D, it's most likely 3D, and vice versa. I'm more than excited for next week, but I would love to hear your thoughts. What are some of your favorite moments, some things you're looking forward to? Let me know.